I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and today we are going to follow up with our coverage of the Zachary Hughes case. If you missed my video earlier today where I covered Zachary Hughes's testimony, I also went over the history of this case. Please check out that last video. If you go to the live tab, it should be right there. I did not get to finish all of the defenses. So if there was the defense closing and then if the process, so I haven't been able to finish the rest of the video. We are going to watch the closing statements together. Oh, you felt like they were uninspiring. I thought the prosecution did a good job. So I'll love to see y'all's thoughts and reactions here in the chat. I thought the prosecution did a good job, and I thought the defense did their best with the client. The defendant admitted to the crime or admitted to the act, but they're trying to say his heart wasn't depraved. Like he didn't have anger in his heart. Okay. So let's hop right into this coverage. If you would like to see this without my commentary, I do have a link to this down in the description. These are the closing arguments for the Zachary Hughes case. All right.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the moment where myself.
The prosecution is starting. Y'all know I listen to 0.15 or faster. So I'm going to slow it down to normal speed. Trigger warnings I think just for describing how she was unalived.
Myself and the defense have an opportunity to speak to you directly. It's called our closing statement, our closing arguments. All the evidence that you're going to hear in this case, you've already heard it. It's either sitting right here or it's through testimony that you've already heard. And so my goal here is to just talk a little bit about this case with you and sort of explain the state's perspective and how we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Zach Hughes did in fact commit the crimes that he's alleged to have committed. And I'm going to go through those crimes a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to go briefly through the evidence and explain my perspective on those things. I will give you a bit of a caveat that this is a little bit of a unique case in that you rarely have the defendant testifying and admitting to the entire crime during the trial.
Admitted to all of it.
So in that respect, my closing argument may be a little different or maybe a little abnormal than our normal way we do things. But I'm going to do my best. I first want to thank you for your service. It's been a long 2 weeks. Y'all have been extremely attentive. You've paid attention. You've listened to the judge. And to be frankly, I couldn't ask for a better jury. And I appreciate your service. On behalf of my co-counsel, Mr. Jake Hoferth, Investigator Jared Sparkman, and Master Deputy Blake Wolf, we thank you for your service. Now, I told you in my opening statements that once you see and hear all the testimony in this trial, and I did not know that the defendant was going to testify, you're going to find that Zach Hughes, I don't know if you remember what I said, is a cold-blooded killer.
So that was in opening statements. In opening statements, the prosecution called him a cold-blooded killer. And I think Zachary Hughes wanted to humanize himself. And maybe that's why he talked about grace so much. So like, hey, understand how I got this way, how I could do this to another woman. I love women. I respect women. I would never hurt. I was raised to never hurt women or children. To me, he was trying to explain what Zachary Hughes was trying to explain away the evidence, especially his DNA under her fingernails. All right, let's keep it going.
And I submit that the state, and along with the testimony of Zach Hughes, we did in fact prove all of that beyond a reasonable doubt. Zach Hughes is a cold-blooded killer. Zach Hughes is an admitted cold-blooded killer. And keep in mind, he solved John Mello's problems. So the judge is going to instruct you on the law, and just as we're going to abide by his rulings, you must abide by his instructions. Remember, I told you he's the referee, calls balls and strikes, and he also tells us what the rules are, what the law is. Y'all took an oath way long ago than you can probably remember, back in last week on Monday, a week ago. And you said you would take an oath, you would adhere to his instructions, you would do your duty as jurors, and I have no doubt in my mind that you will absolutely do that. Now, before Zach Hughes admitted to the murder of Christina Parcell, the state called approximately 32 witnesses. We submitted close to 200 exhibits. If you put all this on a hard drive, it's a little over 4 terabytes of information. And all of that taken together, it's a lot of evidence to digest. Now, with the admission of Zach Hughes to a lot of the state's case, the questions you were presented with at the beginning of the case really are answered. Regardless of what he may believed in his head, his actions are what matter in this courtroom.
I thought that was powerful. The state focusing on his actions and not because the defense is going to try to say that he had a pure heart. Like that was my kind of what I got from the part of the defense's closing that I was able to listen to.
Actions speak louder than words. And boy, do we have a lot of cold, calculated, horrific actions in this case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you must find the facts based on the evidence in this trial and solely based on the evidence presented at this trial inside this courtroom. And it's undisputed that Zach Hughes planned, he lay and waited, he broke into Christina Parcell's home with a .22 and a knife, some roses. She had just returned home from an interview, from her last interview with Vet Tech. Zach Hughes, a person she had never met. She had never met him. Beat her with a gun, brutally stabbed her 35 times, severing her jugular vein and her carotid artery.
And I see a lot of comments that people think the child essay should have come in, but what if he was wrong? So what if? What if he was wrong though? Because before this, there was no concrete evidence that that's what was happening. And my heart still breaks for the child in this case because I've worked with children that have been victims of harm by a parent, and every child is different. Some of those children, they still loved that parent. They wanted that parent to get justice, and they wanted what was happening to them to stop, but they wouldn't have wanted that parent to be brutally unalived. And so for him to say that he did this for the child, that doesn't sit right with me personally. It just doesn't sit right with me. And I think there were other things that could have happened. There are other things, and it does sound like they tried a few things, but it was a lot of deception and lies. So, like, they lied to CPS. He lied and said that he was a next door neighbor and tried to report alleged harm. He sent out those embarrassing pictures to try, I don't know what, to try to get her to stop. And listening to the closing, so the state is going to get into the father's behavior and to John Mello's behavior. I wasn't aware that John Mello had taken her to Italy for months and had the child in Italy without the mother's permission. And so like this was a difficult case. And I did watch. It's out there. If you look on YouTube, there is, and I'll put the link in the chat. Um there is the, I don't know if it's arraignment or but you see where the charges are read for John Mello, and Christina's sister um gets to say something. And like, I know Christina did, like, there is evidence that horrific things happened, but this isn't the way that we handle justice, in my opinion. So, all right. Because my concern is that that child could feel that her mother's death was her fault. And it wasn't her fault. That child did nothing wrong. What happened to her was wrong. And then also, I personally feel that what happened to her mother was wrong too. Um so the state, uh they did not put up any rebuttal witnesses because he admitted to the crime. So the state did not put up any rebuttal witnesses. They asked him one question. They just asked him one question, and that was it. So, all right, let's keep it going.
Now, as we go through the evidence and we look at some of the different things, I'm going to ask you to keep in mind of the charges that you're actually looking at. So the first charge I'm explaining is the harassment charge. And there's two harassment. There's harassment and there's conspiracy to commit harassment. The only difference is the conspiracy requires two or more people joining and to commit the harassment. So harassment is just a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that serves no legitimate purpose and cause that person and would cause a reasonable person in his position to suffer mental or emotional distress. That's related to all those photos and those documents that you saw mailed out. I think there's 7 envelopes full of photos and other documents. You heard testimony about what was in those. Some of them are in evidence. Some were just described because those were pictures of Christina Parcell without any clothes on. So we didn't introduce those so as not to embarrass her or her family. Burglary first. A person is guilty of burglary first if he enters a dwelling without consent and with the intent to commit a crime. And I remind you, the judge is going to tell you the law is, what it is. I'm just trying to give you an outline so you can keep that in mind as we're going through this evidence. And they enter without consent and they're armed with a deadly weapon or cause physical injury. Well, those things all already appeared in this case. Zach Hughes went in under a ruse of roses, according to his own testimony. But he went in directly with the intent to commit harm, and he had weapons on him. And then you've got murder. You also have possession of the weapon during the commission of a violent crime. That is, if you used a weapon and you murder somebody, that is the possession of the weapon during that commission of a violent crime. But you have murder, which is the killing of any person with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought. And you're going to hear those words a lot in the judge's instructions. But malice is ill will towards another person, the intentional doing of a wrong act with the intent to inflict injury. And I think I said early on, ladies and gentlemen, it was a depraved heart, an angry heart, with the intent to harm somebody. And there's also express malice, meaning it's expressed, it's right there in front of you. And it's shown when there are words of hatred or when someone prepares to do the act. They prepare to go in there. It's called premeditation. Is what you'll hear the judge charge you. Premeditation is preparing to go and harm somebody, like lying in wait, like buying weapons beforehand, by concealing your identity going in there. Those kinds of things are premeditation, things that you do in preparation of the violent act. And if you find those things.
And I know this part might feel boring, but the state has to explain the law. And so I think that's just what he's doing. He's explaining how the testimony and everything fits within the law because the jury is going to be using the law.
When you find the state proved those beyond a reasonable doubt, then you can find the defendant guilty. So before we get in, let's start with a little background now. You know the players, you know everybody involved in here, you know the victim. You've heard a lot about the victim, Christina Parcell. You've heard a lot about John Mello. heard a lot about Zach Hughes, and you've heard a lot about Christina Parcell and John Mello's daughter. So the background, and we're talking the time frame from 2020, October 2020-ish, to October 13th, 2021. So we're roughly a time span of 1 year. And what happens throughout that year that leads up to the murder of Christina Parcell? Zach Hughes never talked to Christina Parcell. He didn't know Christina Parcell. He never met Christina Parcell. Everything he knew about Christina Parcell, even according to his own testimony, was told to him by John Mello or shown to him in certain evidence. John Mello was in a nasty custody battle with Christina Parcell. We all know that. He was on his 4th round of custody disputes with Christina Parcell. Keep in mind, and according to the Guardian ad Alem, the prior 3 were just as nasty, but they'd always been settled where John Mello would have significant custody of their daughter. But in April of 2021, that changed. The tide changed for John Mello because he took Aida out of the country in violation of that order, according to the Italian courts. And he took her to Italy. And Christina Parcell didn't even know about that until she saw a social media post where she realizes my daughter's out of the country, I can't see or talk to her, and she's with her father. Thus, the continuation of this nasty child custody dispute. And then from October to April, Aida was living in Italy with little or no contact with Christina. So what did Christina do? She did what any mother would do, is she tried to get the return of her daughter. So she went through this process, and it was explained by Christina's sister, Tina Parcell, as well as the guardian ad litem, Vanessa Cormelo. She filed under what's called the Hague Convention, and she asked to have her daughter returned to her. She actually flew to Italy twice to have these hearings in Italy. And she was successful. She won that particular battle in this myriad of battles of child custody that have been going on between these two individuals. And so in April of 2021, that really set off John Mello. He was unhappy. And we know the things, and we're going to talk about the things that he did starting that day through the WhatsApps, through the harassment letters, everything else, to solve that custody dispute problem. And that's where this case really, really began. That is when things turned not in favor of Christina Parcell. She lost her life as a result. So what is the relationship between Zach Hughes and John Mello? All right, so where did they all come into this mass of characters? Well, according to Zach, he met John on the streets of Greenville about August of 2020, and he was with Aida, and Zach played a very likable classical music piece that John Mello and Aida liked, and that's how they met. So they met that one time. That was one of the few times that Zach Hughes actually met Aida Mello. And he talked about they went on about 4 or 5, maybe 6 occasions where they were hanging out. They got some tacos one night. They saw a museum. But Aida Mello didn't know Zach Hughes. She didn't know who he was. She's a 9-year-old little girl who.
And somebody pointed this out on the last stream that it was kind of weird that Zach Hughes described her as a friend, but it was like, but because he said like, this was my friend, but like, and not in like but it was just, I don't have any children that I would describe as my friend. I have nieces that I adore. They are I always describe them as my friends' kids. Like that's how I describe the kids that I know, or I don't have any children that I refer to as my friend. Yeah, exactly. I say like my friend's daughter, my friend's son. I wouldn't call them my friend, the child.
Heard him play a piano piece, who's a friend of her dad's, And that's all the time they ever spent together. That's it. In August until October, John Mello left for Italy. And with him went Aida. So Zach Hughes never spent any more time with Aida, what little time he did during that small time, ever, never again. Now, he may have seen her on a FaceTime while he's talking to her dad. He may have seen her or seen videos of that, which he testified to. But Zach acted on this stand as if he could see into her soul. He could see into her eyes. He knew how she was feeling.
So I wonder if Zach ever talked with John about how much Christina reminded him of Grace. Because when he talks about Grace, there is this animosity and contempt that when he's talking about his former adoptive sister who ended up I think the family relinquished parental rights. And I explained on my last stream, it really sounded like Grace was exhibiting classic symptoms of reactive attachment disorder, being adopted from Russia at 10 years old, and then the adoption, the family relinquishing custody in the first 4 years. So yeah, like it's just how how did how did the dad know? But the dad sounds like he would ask anybody to do something like this. It's an interesting situation.
You could tell that she gained weight and why she gained weight at a certain particular time in her life, in her adolescent life. He is drawing those conclusions on a little bit of information and nothing but whatever John Mello is feeding him. So, what's their first thing? Aida's back with her mother. She, in May, begins living at Canebrake with her aunt, Tina Parcell, and that's where they're living there. John Mello's in Italy, and Zach Hughes and John Mello decide, well, you know what we're going to do? Let's embarrass Christina Parcell. Let's make her life look bad. Let's make her look like a prostitute. That'll help me get custody of her. That'll help me with the guardian ad litem. And so John Mello, according to Bevel, Detective Bevel, who testified, had photos, and according to the evidence right here, he had photos of Christina Parcell. And those photos were taken when she was much younger. And those photos are taken between two consensual adults engaging in what acts that two consensual adults can do. And that's it. And then he took those photos and he used them as a weapon. And he tried to make her look like a prostitute. Because that's what John Mello continually told Zach Hughes, according to his own testimony, Alex Field's affidavit.
And let's say, and so like this so much comes up with this case. Like this is just a hard one.
Let's make her look like a prostitute and let's send them around to a neighborhood. Well, they sent them to a neighborhood where Brad Post lived. They didn't even send them to Canebrake. And we know this because in these WhatsApps, they talk about it specifically. They talk about, may I present to you my daughter's mother, Christina, Caroline Warren, escort.
Okay, y'all, I have to speed him up just a little bit, okay? So if it bothers you, you can go and you can slow it down a little bit. But I need to speed him up to 1.25.
And
this might be why some people didn't like it. But I think he's just talking in a way that the jury can get it. I don't know, but I need to speed him up.
We know there's a bunch of attachments that we can't see because Zach Hughes deleted these on October 13th. And when we retrieve them from WhatsApp, they're deleted. So you have to see us, investigator Sparkman, manipulating these WhatsApps. And then they sent them that way. And then Zach Hughes receives them. He gets them. And he sees an email that was sent to him as well. This email is very important. And he prepares all these packages to Brad Post, to Mr. Bradley Post. These are all his PO box. Brad Post, cigar bar, where Brad Post hangs out. Misspells Mr. Post one time in the WhatsApps. Misspells it here, P-O-A-S-T, which is why we know it.
I believe Brad Post was the victim's boyfriend at the time. Correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
Hughes admitted it. But this email here purports to come from Mullen Investigations at protonmail.com. And it's cut out. And you've got this photo of Christina Parcell, and you've got another photo of Christina Parcell back there, which is the same ones that are in here, but there's no URL with Bella Donji on right here. And this is the escort site, and it says Caroline Warren. She became a member, Caroline Warren, in 2009. Well, this is 2021. And apparently this Mullen Investigations on May 16th found these photos attached to this website, except the photos don't have anything attached to the website. It's just a square of an escort site of Caroline Warren. I don't know who that is. I know this. I know Caroline Warren. I know Mullen Investigations, John Mello. Vanessa Carmelo testified to it. She received emails from Mullen Investigations. She received lots of emails from people purporting to be John Mello. So Zach Hughes went to the trouble.
Snapchat is the one where sometimes depends on how you're messaging, because there are so you can have messages disappear. WhatsApp is just a communication app. And remember, anywhere you post, it's held on a server. So even disappearing Snapchat messages, they exist on a server for a period of time, and they can be subpoenaed. And so, yes, WhatsApp is just end-to-end encrypted messages, but those can be subpoenaed, or you can do the phone extraction and see those messages. So, yeah.
Of preparing all these envelopes, manipulating all the items, the photos, the escort, and putting it together. And he wanted to make sure we knew it was her. And so we would add a cover letter. You can see the cover letter that he would do. You had to add a cover letter to make sure you knew exactly who that was. That it was Christina Parcell that was engaging in prostitution. And he sent them out to shame her, to make fun of her. There's WhatsApps in there saying, we're going to ruin her day. And Zach Hughes did it the same way he committed this murder. He used his bike, he avoided cameras, tried to find a location, and he didn't know that we could track his phone. And so we know he was in Greenville when he mailed those in June and July, and he was in Tennessee when the other two were mailed. So we know he did all that. But the big point of the harassment is not that that's bad to do somebody. It's really what Tina Parcell referred to as revenge porn. South Carolina does not have a statute for revenge porn. They have harassment. And that's exactly what that is. But he's really doing it, one, to make her look bad, to make her look like a prostitute. But he's also trying to do it to gain a strategic advantage in this custody battle. And it doesn't work. He even sends one to the guardian ad litem. What does the guardian ad litem do? She investigates everything. But Brad Post put a lot of work in. Zach Hughes put a lot of work into that. It's a lot of work finding all those envelopes to somebody he doesn't even know. He's never met, never talked to. Now, John Mello, I would say he's pretty much a liar. He dated Christina back in 05 and 06 and had their daughter in 2012. And of course, this custody battle. And if you want to look about the character and who John Mello is, I refer you back to Vanessa Cormelow's testimony. She testified that John Mello would do horrific things in relation to this custody battle. To her, to a lawyer who's representing a little girl as a guardian ad litem who's practicing law for 26 years, he would accuse her of horrific things.
So it's my understanding that the child's father, John Mello, that he was harassing the guardian ad litem as well, which is a huge red flag. Like that's not a good thing.
According to her, he would accuse her of trafficking children in Spartanburg. He would post things on social media ridiculing her. And that's how John Mello operated. That's how he operated. He used deceit by using fake emails. He used threats to try to get what he wanted. Mullen investigation. He sent those to Vanessa Carmelo. He sent an email pertaining to be a lawyer named Sophia Carlucci, according to Vanessa Carmelo. And she knew it was John Mello writing it because she's read so many emails from him, they matched up. So he's trying to gain a strategic advantage. John Mello and Zach Hughes were trying to harm Christina because John Mello had a custody problem. And the only way to solve it was murder. So Zach visits John for 3 weeks in June in Italy. So he met him for 5 times between August and October 2020. They're having lots of conversations on the WhatsApp, and he's in 3 weeks in June in Italy. And it was a pretty important moment when Zach Hughes said, John Mello offered me $5,000 to kill Christina Parcell. John Mello offered me $10,000 to kill Christina Parcell. Now, of course, Zach said he wouldn't take that money. He would just do it for free because killing Christina Parcell is the right thing to do. So I submit that's when the plot to murder Christina Parcell began. That's kind of when this evolved. And I think they started with the photos, which were in June and July, but that wasn't going to carry any weight with anything. Interesting that a struggling pianist turned down $10,000.
A struggling pianist. A struggling pianist would turn down $10,000. So if you haven't seen the other testimony, Zach Hughes, when he was testifying, he said that the father, John Mello, offered him $5,000 and then $10,000, but he wasn't going to do it for money. It wasn't going to be for money. That's what he said.
Do it for free. Especially of a person he's never met on behalf of a little girl he barely knows. Now, much of what Zach Hughes said, I believe, on that stand was true. I think a lot of it was a bunch of self-serving, narcissistic junk. Zach Hughes is trying to portray himself on that stand as a hero instead of the cold-blooded killer that he is. Ladies and gentlemen, we judge the defendant by their actions, not by their excuses or their words. Actions speak much louder than any self-serving lies from a sadistic, pathological killer like Zach Hughes.
Prosecution is not holding back their words. Sadistic, pathological, the prosecution is not holding back.
He murdered Christina Parcell, mother to Aida, sister to Tina Parcell, and daughter to Erica and Tim Parcell. Now, I talked a lot about Vanessa Cormolo because she's a key witness, because that is the dispute that we're having, the custody battle. And she's in charge of making recommendations about who should get custody. Her job is to investigate the custodians. She stated that she investigated every allegation which were at Christina, which was involved in prostitution and drugs. She stated she would investigate every allegation, hire private investigators, put trackers on cars, meet with potential custodians, have home visits, and talk with the child constantly. So she's doing everything that she can possibly do. She even had allegations like Alex Fields. There's an affidavit that the defense submitted on Alex Fields, where he says that he was propositioned by Christina Parcell for sex and offered to sell him drugs. And he put in an affidavit. This was after John Mello put on Craigslist, "You have any information about Christina Parcell that I know about? I'd like to know anything about who responds to a Craigslist ad about somebody." And then sets an example of what they did at a bar. And for what purpose? Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. I have no idea. That's what Alex Fields says. Really doesn't matter. While the defense wants to impugn the integrity of Christina Parcell as a justification for committing murder, so be it. If doing bad things means anyone can break into my house and stab me 35 times without retribution, then two things will happen. There'll be a lot of people stabbed to death, and I'll be out of a job, because all we'll have is vigilante justice in our system. But again, these are allegations that John Mello is making. He's looking for any dirt on Christina Parcell. Again, these are all allegations.
There's a good comment down here that the system did miss the harm that was happening to the child, and I will tell you, in cases like this, it can be really difficult for the child to come forward, especially when things start at a young age, and things have progressed, and it's a parent involved. That makes things a lot more complicated. Sometimes the child doesn't want to get the parent in trouble, and so that's why anytime I'm working with children, um because later it's going to come up, that what if you suspect something, and there have been times when I've suspected something wasn't okay, and all you can do is you know do the assessment, and it really is hard. And so I try to create safety for children and teens in my office. There have been times where I found out later that someone that I had worked with, that I was unaware of something that was happening, but I hope that the safety in our office, in my office, helped give that child the courage, the strength to be able to say something later. And for the people that can't. So I've worked with adults that have never told anyone about what happened to them in childhood. And so it's incredibly difficult to do. And I've never worked with somebody that said, I wish somebody had just eliminated that person forever. I've never, but like I'm sure some people might feel that way. But once again, we don't do crimes here. Like we're not for crimes. Like don't do crimes.
Well, let's come to October. Vanessa Cormelo is getting close to making her decision. Who's going to get custody? Her investigation revealed that before Christina's murder, she would write a favorable report for Christina Parcell and a bad one. That's what Vanessa Cormelo said. In addition, it was almost 6 months since Aida had come home, and that's important. 6 months. Someone can file to terminate the parental rights of another. We were about to be 6 months. Zach Hughes said October was the time that he felt it was the time to kill her. Just felt it in his heart and his mind. And he tried on the 12th, did it on the 13th. That is important because it was getting close. John Mello's getting a bad report.
And Zachary Hughes said the timeline was because he was about to go out of country. He was about to go on a job, and he thought if he didn't do it, that harm would happen to the child. But the judge had already ruled that this did not fit the defense of another. Like that I think there is a defense of like, I stepped in defense of another, but it has to be an imminent threat. And the judge had already ruled that that wasn't the case in this situation. So,
And things aren't going to go his way, so he's got a problem. Now, if Christina Parcell is no longer around, he's the last man standing. He's going to get custody. So Zach admittedly decides to murder Christina Parcell. That was his intent. He bought a gun and a knife about a month before. It was weighing on his soul. Custody dispute's not going well. And so he entered into a lot of planning going into this murder, a ton of planning. And the state presented all of this evidence to you before he testified. But we know that Zach Hughes on the 12th was up at the Mountain House because his phone showed that he was up there. And while up there, he had his truck. And we know he put his bike in the back of the truck. And we know he parked it somewhere. And we know that he decided to park somewhere near Canebrake and ride his bike in there. And we didn't know, but we know that he knew the schedule of Christina Parcell that day, because he said John Mello told him. So he gets in his truck, and I would submit he arrives around 7:42-ish to somewhere wherever he parked. We never learned exactly where he parked near Canebrake, but we know he parked somewhere there and he rode his bike. Because at 7:42, we know from his phone that he plugs it in and unlocks it. And that's the last activity on his phone at that time. So he parks, maybe he plans, he thinks, and he gets on his bike and he drives in. And we know he drives in because he passes Donna Gorman's house. And Donna Gorman was an early witness from the state. And she did an identification of Zach Hughes from that witness stand. The state was not expecting that. We had never shown her a photo lineup. We'd shown her a photo of the bike, of Zach on the bike from the ring cameras.
I'm going to fast forward through this part.
But she had never seen Zach in person.
I won't.
And so we just left it. Now, we did wait until about 3 years after the murder before Donna Gorman told us that information. That is true.
So if he hadn't admitted to doing the crime, and the defense is going to try to say that, how could she have possibly remembered all these years later? But he admitted to being there and doing the crime. So
Riley Stokes talked to her that day, and he didn't have a copy of it. Master Deputy Wolf talked to her on the 19th, and he didn't show her a copy of the person on the bike. And so there was so much chaos going on, so many officers moving in so many directions, trying to find the evidence to solve this murder. It was just overlooked. And so when we went and talked to her, this was her testimony. And that's what we presented to this jury. She was right. She was right. The DNA proved it. Zach Hughes proved it. So Donna Gorman sees him, and she says it's around 8:15-ish when he goes by. And then he goes to Christina Parcells' house. And my opinion is that he went and he hid under the bottom of the house. His testimony was different. He says different. He says that he got there and went straight in, dropped his bike, and went to the front door. We have a difference. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe I'm wrong. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I submit that he went and he waited. He had an hour to wait. Of course, he had an hour drive from the Mountain House all the way to Canebrake. You know what he could have done? He could have turned around. He could have done anything he wanted. He could have gone to the QT. He could have changed his mind. He had many opportunities to do that. He was committed. And so he went and he lied and he waited. And he waited for a time because he knew her schedule and he knew her car. He knew her address. That's in evidence. And he went and he decided to walk in the front door with roses as a ruse, according to his testimony, with a gun and a knife and a backpack, paint thinner so he could clean up afterwards. And he kills her. So let's see the moments before Christina Parcells is murdered.
I really couldn't see anything. He's going to show a video, and I guess it shows. I
Grace Flowers
tell.
points a gun at her, hits her in the head with the gun. And then he stabs, and he begins to stab, and he begins to slash, and he begins to slash, and he begins to stab, and slash. Now think of the force needed to stab someone in the chest, stabbed him in the back, all over the head. And finally, and through all the fighting and the stabbing and the pushing, while Christina is fighting for her life, he finds the vulnerable spots, stabs her in the jugular and the carotid artery, causing her to bleed out.
This part gets graphic.
With blunt force trauma to the head, she has to be on the ground. Blood is everywhere, pulling around her dropped phone and the couch. But that's not enough. He drags her through her own blood to cover up the crime as he closes the curtains and locks the front door.
So I don't open the door when people are coming around trying to get you to sign up for solar panels, or if it's a package, they can leave it at the door. I don't open the door. Really.
So he's not detected as droplets of blood fall from his blood-soaked clothes. She remains laying on that floor in her own blood with nothing but her blood-soaked scrubs and her wedding band Brad Bose gave her. But his sadistic actions are not over. I submit, ladies and gentlemen, those rose petals had a dual purpose. He may have used them as a...
And what do y'all think the rose petals were about? We didn't talk about the rose petals on the last stream. I wonder if he was trying to make it look like a lover came and did this because he put because I guess he sprinkled rose petals and he also left a what's the word? A substance there, and the prosecution is going to mention it. Someone saying possibly misdirection. But yeah, like I wonder if that was going into the like a date gone wrong. Like I wonder if that's what he was trying to make it look like. Uh, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like she had a date. But who would sprinkle like, that's just weird that they would sprinkle the rose petals to me.
ruse to get in
Mm.
and get inside the house so he could surprise Christina and gain that strategic advantage to murder her. But he also sprinkled them around. He sprinkled them around the house, on her purse, around some sort of sadistic, artistic sign that he thought was necessary. Then he had to keep in line with the allegations: prostitution and drugs. Put a bag of cocaine under a couch, under a chair, right down from her body. Killing her wasn't enough. Shaming her was the goal, too. This was not to save Aida. This was to help John Mello win his custody case. He never told us about the drugs either. Never mentioned those. So then the cover-up. So then, after you effectuate the crime, you commit it, then you got to clean up. You got to cover up. So you first had to cover up the scene. You had to worry about that DNA under her fingers. That DNA is key to this case. You had to wipe her fingers down with that paint thinner. He did not want to get caught. Pre-planned, and then really good exit strategy, cover up. Anyway, back to the Mountain House. Of course, we know he's there because his phone puts him there around 1:17.
We love digital
He
evidence.
connects to the Wynn Wi-Fi. The Wynn's have a Mountain House. He has access to it. Remember, it's real remote. I think Master Deputy Wolf said it's so remote you could walk around naked. Nobody would see you. Perfect place to clean up a crime scene like that. Can you imagine how soaked in blood his clothes were? Can you imagine how soaked in blood his car was? Can you imagine how soaked in blood his bike was? And he did. And he admitted it. Burned his clothes, ditched the knife and the gun in some pond, cleaned up everything, and he went back to Tyndall about his daily life. And that's what he said. Now, I've mentioned Zach Hughes' testimony a lot. And I'm sorry that you had the unfortunate privilege of hearing the specific testimony of the killing of Christina Parcell by a cold-blooded, cold stone-faced killer trying to portray himself as a hero instead of the cold-blooded, calculating killer that he actually is. Only a person with a severely diminished sense of heroism, with a heart that is cold as ice, can portray that.
I thought that was kind of powerful. I did. I thought, and we'll see what the jury pays attention to. The jury, I think, can't take notes. But yeah,
The absurdity of many of his words.
y'all saw my face as he talked
And I'll
about.
reference a couple. I wanted to make her death quick and painless.
It wasn't.
This is what
It
he
wasn't
said.
quick. It wasn't painless.
When I was listening to that, it was hard for me to comprehend that someone is actually saying that at their trial to a jury.
A straight face.
Do we say thank you? I appreciate it. Thank you for taking my pain into consideration as you murder me. What does that even mean? Well, I'll ask you this. Was it quick and painless when he hit her in the head with a gun? Was it quick and painless when he stabbed her the first time?
So I think no matter what happens, I think he wanted his side of the story to be out there because I do think there will be some people that are sympathetic towards him. Because even here in my chat today, there have been people that have said, maybe he'll get less of he'll get less of a sentence or this or that. To me it would be different if he was the father of the child or if but he didn't really know this child, and he didn't know if what was happening was true or not. I don't feel good about this one. So me personally, um, a lot of people are thinking that the jury might be like maybe the jury won't be able to come to a decision. I think the state would charge him again because I think if the jury's hung, they can do the trial again. The whole thing came off very cold and calculated. The fact that when he went to the door, he asked if her sister, he said the delivery was for her sister. That's just wow. And he's going to say it was because he didn't want to harm any other people. So, like, how would we feel if the CSAM allegations weren't true? Because that was a possibility. Or how would we feel if a neighbor had unexpectedly walked in and he also to not have a witness if more people had, been harmed. And so like ugh, this one's a hard one.
Was it quick and painless when he stabbed her the second time? How about the fifth?
He's gonna go through it.
And then, of course, I asked him one question. How'd you drag her body across the room? And he said, I don't really recall, but I think it was by her ankles. And he looked me in the eyes in a stone cold faced way. Told me the answer.
Matter of fact.
Like he was proud of it. He said, I do not want anyone else to be involved. I waited till everyone was gone. Thanks. Appreciate that. Talking like he's doing us a favor. I wonder what would happen if a neighbor did come over.
See?
I wonder what would happen if Brad Post had showed up. I wonder what would happen if Tina Parcell had showed up. Would it be a double homicide so we could escape detection? And of course, he was so calculated, he got her schedule that day from John Mello. And then he said, I didn't want to get caught because they would connect me to John Mello. Oh, okay. So if you didn't get caught, you've solved the custody problem. But if I did get caught, then I didn't solve the custody problem because then they would connect me to John Mello and he wouldn't get custody. Then he comes in here, testifies, connects John Mello. Doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
Now, he talked a good bit about his background. My understanding, he's a fantastic pianist, highly trained. But he went through his resume with an ego, letting you all know how great he really was. Military service.
We skipped over that part on when I covered his testimony. So the first part of his testimony was just all of his accomplishments, and he is accomplished. So like he is a Juilliard trained pianist, and so like he does have some achievements, but it reminds me of Sarah Boone talking about her straight A's. Like,
Playing these really difficult sonatas by Beethoven. I'm going to play all 16, never been done. But he described his sister Grace in great detail as well, for some reason. He said she was a horrific person when confronted with irrefutable evidence. She would go cold, stone-faced. She would manipulate and recruit others to do a terrible deed. If you trust Grace, you're only going to get hurt again. she was a vampire and would suck the blood right out of you. Maybe he's described himself.
When I heard this, I watched this part earlier, and when he said that, because his description of Grace, it was ironic to me that he didn't seem to see some of the parallels of his behavior and Grace's behavior. Because if he could have gotten away with this, I think he would have tried to get away with this. I think he would have lied or not testified if they were able to throw out the DNA evidence. If he could have gotten away with this, I think he would have tried. And so that's where when he brought in the adopted sister who was not involved in this crime at all, and he's trying to correlate, this was how I knew Christina was such an evil person, because he's saying that like Christina didn't deserve life. And yet, like, which makes me like, how does he feel about Grace? Because, or what did he think about like what he could have done or how he could have helped his family back then? I thought it was weird that his parents put him in a caregiving role for the adopted children. I'm not a fan of that personally. I talked about that in the last stream, but I thought that was a pretty powerful comment. Mm.
He said, I feel pity for her. He felt pity for Christina Parcell.
I wasn't sure when he said the pity part. I wasn't sure who he was referring to, because as he was talking, at times, I was like, "Is he talking about Christina? Or is he talking about Grace? Or is he talking about wanting to protect the child?" Like, at times, I wasn't. Now, if you listen, you can kinda tell, but the way that he talked about Grace was the same as how he talked about Christina, and we talk about projection. So, to me, I think he projected some of his own thoughts and his own behaviors, and I don't know this for sure. We're just chatting, okay? This is just for fun. To me, it seemed like he was kinda projecting some of his own stuff onto other people and then his own past. So we talk about that as transference. So he had had this bad experience with his adoptive sister that he thought, was going to get away with all of these things. And I think he feels she ruined the family for the 4 years that she was in the home. I personally feel that she likely had symptoms of reactive attachment disorder and needed significant help and support, especially family support, especially a safe, caring environment. But that's just a whole other situation. And so to me, it just seemed like, because he's trying to say few people have ever met someone like Grace, like Christina. And I do agree that there are manipulative people out there. There are people that get away with things, and but I don't believe in vigilante justice. That's just my own thoughts.
How is that even possible of a human being? His heart is so mean.
Uh-oh. No. Oh, I don't know why it did that. It skipped ahead. No, we're gonna have to find where we were. Oy vey. It skipped ahead. I wonder if the other stream ended. Sometimes this happens when the other stream ends. So let me try to figure out where we were. Mm, mm, this is this is not good. I'm gonna try to find it. Okay. I'm close to where we were. Okay.
He said, I feel pity for her. He felt pity for Christina Parcell. How is that even possible of a human being? His heart is so mean, so depraved, that he viewed someone he'd never met and discussed the specific details of killing her, treating her like she was an elderly dog being sent to the vet to be euthanized. It doesn't get any meaner than that.
I don't love the animal reference, but that's just me personally.
Christina Parcell didn't have to die. Zach Hughes had a million opportunities to not do this. And if he did it to save Aida, there's a million ways to handle that. Vigilante justice is not allowed in this state. Vigilante justice isn't allowed anywhere. Regardless of what Zach Hughes had in his mind or what he thinks he had into his heart, he's lying to himself. Because all he had was hate and meanness, coldness. He brutally murdered Christina Parcell. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long 2 weeks. I thank you for your service. I thank you for listening to me. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. I'm going to ask you to go back there and deliberate. I'm going to ask you to find Zach Hughes guilty of harassment, of burglary, of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, and murder. Thank you.
Defense is going to get up. This sound might be better. We'll see.
I want to start with something that Mr. Wilkins said towards the beginning of his comments to you. He said, Zach Hughes solved John Mello's problems. Yesterday, Zach Hughes told you he solved Aida Mello's problems. That's what he told you yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to watch the state. You got to watch the evidence. Zach Hughes yesterday came in here and told you under oath that he killed Christina Parcell on October the 13th, 2021. He told you that. But contrary to what Mr. Wilkins just told you, killing somebody in and of itself is not a crime. Mr. Wilkins told you that he confessed to committing the crime. That is not the case. Yesterday, Zach Hughes told you that he killed Christina Parcell, but in doing that, he did not tell you or confess to any crime. And let me be clear. Let me tell you why I say that. Every crime, and the judge is going to tell you this in the instructions, every crime has two parts in general terms. The actus reus, which is the action.
So the defense is just doing what defense attorneys do, but we are going to watch it, and we're going to talk about it.
And the mens rea, which is what's in your mind, the intent that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's very important that you understand this from the get-go. He did not confess to a crime yesterday.
So I am going to slow him down to 1, and we'll see. We'll see how he is at normal. And then if we need to speed him up a little, we will.
Yesterday, he confessed to killing Christina Parcell, but that in and of itself does not make him guilty of murder. That's very important. Okay? The first part of, or Mr. Wilkins had talked about how this case is unique. It is unique. And one of the unique parts about this case is that first part that I talked about, the actus reus, the action that's involved, there's very little dispute, if any.
He did it.
Zach admitted that he killed Christina Parcell.
Yep.
Right? Where the dispute is, where the heart of this case is the evidence as to what was in Zach's heart, what was in Zach's mind, that the state must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. It must be evidence that leaves you firmly convinced. It must be evidence that would cause you not to hesitate to act. Right? That's what they have to do. So the heart of this whole case, Mr. Wilkinson can talk about the blood, he can talk about the scene, he can talk about all these things. But the heart of this case is the intent, is the mens rea. What have they proven about Zach's intent?
So the reason why we're going to watch him at regular speed right now is because when I speed him up, it sounds like he's coming across like it changes the affect of things. And so we're going to watch it at normal. I probably will. My ADHD brain will probably need to speed it up just a little bit. So we'll see. And if you're watching on replay, adjust as needed.
All right. Now, let's talk more about what the judge is going to charge on the law and what they have to prove about intent, about the mental side of this. Right? Zach has been charged with murder. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt malice. That is the intent.
And to me, I think he had hate in his heart for because so I do not want bad things to happen to children. I would not take someone out because of it. Like I believe in using the justice system. If I felt something had slipped through the cracks, I wouldn't feel like it was my responsibility to save um that like my responsibility and my responsibility alone. That's not my approach to things. If it was my child, I would have to it would be a lot. But I really it's a lot. So we're gonna keep it going.
The knowledge, the mental part of murder. The state must also prove burglary in the first degree, that when he entered that home, he intended to commit a crime. In this case, murder. He intended to commit the crime.
That's what he said, though.
Which means there was a crime he committed. For harassment, the state must prove that he sent those mailers, which he admitted to doing. He sent those mailers without a legitimate purpose. And for the conspiracy, the state must prove that he formed an agreement to do something illegal. That is the mental component to this. And again, that's the heart of the case. And Mr. Wilkins, in his opening statement, said, we have to prove the state beyond a reasonable doubt an angry heart, that Zach was mad. That's where the heart of this case is. What was Zach thinking? What has the state been able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt about what was in his heart and what was in his mind?
And I think that might have been why Zach came across so flat. And he was trying to seem to come across sad and anxious about what he was about to do. I don't know if that was a performance. I don't know. I don't know what was in his heart. But to do this 35 times to someone, I wouldn't think that like everything's okay. And so when we look at mental health diagnoses, we'd be thinking, is there depression? Is there anxiety? It could fall into homicidal thoughts, but also sometimes people get those kinds of thoughts because they're like mad about a situation. If he did try to claim, um, someone might have tried to say intermittent explosive disorder, but he planned this. Remember, he thought about this, and this was methodically planned. They talked about the day he went to purchase the pew pew and the knife used in the crime. He brought paint thinner to try to get rid of any DNA. Like there are all these, or I don't know if he bought it or if it was just at the house. It might have been in his bag. I don't know. So, but all of these things to me show some planning. And but the defense is doing what defenses are supposed to do. He's defending his client.
Now, you're going to hear the judge is going to talk to you about different types of evidence you can consider. He's going to talk to you about.
I'm gonna fast forward through that part because there's like circumstantial, there's direct evidence, and so all right.
2021. Now, what is the state going to do to try to prove what was in here, to try to establish the burden of the mental side? Again, it's more than just the acts. That's critically important. But what's the state going to use to prove the mental component to this? They're going to use the acts, and they're going to say, they're going to use the stab wounds, the photos. They're going to use all the actions that Zach testified to yesterday, that in and of itself is not a crime. And Mr. Wilkins, he talks about stab, and I wrote this down, stab, 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 slash, right? Got to watch. Got to be careful, right? This is a tragic case. Bottom line, someone died. The last thing I ever want to do is minimize the tragedy in this case. Not going to do it, right? But
He said, but
when we come to talk to you about what happened, you have to have faith that what we are saying is balanced. Think about what Zach testified to and what Claire Rose testified to about Christina Parcell and what happened that day, right? Stab, 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 slash, slash, slash. Claire Rose testified Christina Parcell was 163 pounds. Zach testified that he was 160 pounds. Claire Rose testified that there were, of the 35 wounds, the vast majority were incised wounds, superficial wounds, wounds that would have been consistent with a struggle. Zach told you that when he went inside, there was a struggle. He told you that they fell to the floor. He told you that when he got inside, his body would not do what he was telling it to do because he didn't want to do it.
Those are the words he said. That's what he's okay. So I think that's how they're trying to get around first degree. We're gonna play.
He did not want to have to do it. So let's talk about the circumstantial evidence that the state has offered as evidence to try to get you to understand what was in Zach's mind. The state talks about, and in determining how much weight to give to their representations about their conclusions on the circumstantial evidence, just think about this. Donna Gorman testified that 3 years after this happened, having never been shown a photo lineup, was
Donna is, I think, a neighbor or so, like that was one of the eyewitnesses that whose testimony got a lot clearer 3 years later, which isn't common. I know. But there's also DNA evidence, and he said he did the thing. So
Zach's face all over the television and the internet that she says that she saw Zach. Now, here's what is most troublesome about this whole thing. She testified that she saw Zach at 8:15. That's what she testified to. She testified she saw Zach through 2 trees in her house, that he was wearing a hoodie. No evidence other than what she said about a hoodie in back.
I wasn't sure why he's focusing on this part when Zach said it was him and he did the thing, but I guess it's to maybe also get at the other testimony might not have. I don't know. I'm not an attorney at all, so but he's going to say these things. But his client admitted to being there and doing the thing.
Zach said that he was wearing a hat or a smaller hat.
A beanie.
There is no way that she could have seen Zach Hughes at 8:15 because by the state's own evidence, with the ring cameras, with investigator Sparkman, the state's own evidence, Zach didn't even get there until after 9 o'clock. So when he says, Donna Gorman, she saw him, it's impossible that she saw him the way she said, because she said 8:15 by their own admission, by their own evidence. Zach didn't even get there until after 9 o'clock. Think about that. In determining how much weight to give to their spin on the circumstantial evidence, think about investigator Sparkman, right? Called him as a witness and showed him reams of WhatsApp messages. These messages were garbled, but he had a unique skill. I don't know if he went to WhatsApp school, but he spoke fluent WhatsApp, right? And he was asked to decode all of these messages for you as though you couldn't have done it yourself. But what's the most interesting thing about what he said in the WhatsApp messages, there was one message that he was not able to decode, coincidentally. The message that had the words Aida and doomed. That was the only message he could not uncode for some reason. Think about that. In trying to determine how much weight to assign to the state's conclusions or their spin on the evidence, think about Vanessa Cormelo and what she testified to. Mr. Wilkins talked about how she was doing everything she could during this period to uncover it. Really interesting. And the judge is going to tell you this. You can determine or decide how much weight to give to testimony. You can give it a lot of weight. You can give it a little weight. You can give it no weight. I want you to think about how much weight to assign to the state's conclusions in that testimony, because I want to take you to one specific exchange between Jake Hofferth and Vanessa Cormelo. Jake Hofferth asked Ms. Cormelo prior to October the 13th, 2021, and he said this, and they've said this throughout this entire case, prior to the murder of Christina Parcell, which is for you to decide, and you to decide alone.
Okay, that's why you put in quotes.
Prior to October 13th, 2021, did you have a recommendation as to where Aida Mello should live? In other words, would you have had a recommendation as to whether or not she lived with her mother?
He's talking about the guardian ad litem, which is a lawyer that's supposed to represent the best interest of the child. And
what was Vanessa Cormelo's answer to that? And you can hear this for yourself. At the time, I would have recommended the mom. At the time. There was no follow-up to talk about other times. Can you trust that evidence? Very important. That's the circumstantial evidence. Now, let's talk about the direct evidence that you received from Zach himself as to why he did what he did. He got on that stand, he told you. Let's talk about the direct evidence. He talked about what he knew, what he was told by John Mello. That was part of it. He talked about that. But contrary to what Mr. Wilkins said, he had a lot of other information besides just what John Mello told him. He had a deposition that Christina Parcell gave under oath in July of 2016. And you remember I asked him, after you read that deposition, what did you believe about Christina Parcell? What did you believe? He said he believed that she was engaged in prostitution. He said he believed that she had participated in a pornographic movie. He said that he believed that she had used drugs after reading that deposition. Another document that Zach got, Alex Fields' affidavit. Now, this is very important to consider about this. This entire case, the state has worked very hard to distance Christina Parcell from the escort website. And they've made these conclusions just because they want to. Despite the fact that there are website addresses on those photographs, they have insisted that those photographs were private photographs, were taken by John Mello, and then somehow put on the internet by John Mello, that she had nothing to do with that, right? Think about this. And this is an evidence for you to consider. The Alex Fields affidavit, it has one page on the front, which is what he said, that they met randomly at Halls in 2018, that she propositioned him for sex and drugs in exchange for money. He turned that down. But in the second page of the affidavit for Alex Fields, John Mello, in that advertisement, said, if you know this woman, her name is Christina Parcell, and then he puts the Caroline Warren alias in that ad. Here's the question for you to consider. If he didn't think that she really and truly went by Caroline Warren online, why would he put Caroline Warren's name in an ad for people to respond to? Why would he include that if he did not think that may trigger someone who had seen her site? Why would he do that? I would submit to you, he put her name on that ad because she was Caroline Warren, and he was hopeful that someone who had seen the ad or used the ad would recognize the picture and contact him. That's the only reason why that makes sense. Let's talk about the other evidence, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's just talk about that Mr. Wilkins discussed, the planning, right? Let's talk about that. Zach was very honest when he testified about the planning. He told you in detail what he did. In a lot of cases, planning can be good evidence. In a lot of cases, as Mr. Wilkins said, this is a very unique case, and probably,
sir. Defense is, so, and he's just doing his job as a defense attorney, okay? But he's about to do some gymnastics to talk about why, for some reason, Zach's planning does not fit whatever criteria we're gonna listen to him do it. Let's go on ahead.
One of the most unique aspects about this case is that the person who Zach believed posed the danger was the mother to her own child. Think about that. This isn't where you're home and an intruder comes in, you don't know, and it's a spur of the moment. This isn't a random interaction or difficulty. This is what Zach believed. This is a mother, the person who's charged with caring for your child. Most importantly, the person of all on the whole planet who is supposed to be the most nurturing. This is the person who is doing this to the child. The person who lives with the child, the evidence was the person who shared a room with the child.
And the defense snuck that part in. Does that make sense? Because they're not allowed to say that there was child harm because all of that came out the after the murder, and the judge has excluded that. Um, but yeah.
The person who's with the child all the time. So in a situation like that, where you have a belief that's grounded on documents, that's grounded on information shared with.
But the documents weren't so that there were no hard facts of the child harm. Now, granted, there was, but like also, I just want to keep reiterating, what if there wasn't? And the jury is not going to be able to consider child harm. That's not going to be something that the jury is able to consider.
You over many, many months. When you have that belief,
Yes.
how?
I guess he's talking about the whatever stuff John Mello had that he was sending to the garden at Lightham, or like I don't I'm he's losing me a little too.
Do you alleviate that threat, the threat from the mom, without thinking through how to do it? How do you do that? And so I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the planning in this case, unlike most any other case, doesn't show malice because the mom was the threat.
So I wonder if the plan to say it was justified, I wonder if that was what the defendant wanted to do. So I get the feeling that Zachary wanted to get on the stand and not look like a horrific, sadistic, psychopathic. Like, I think he wanted to be viewed as an altruistic, um, defender of children. So to me, this seemed to be what Zach wanted to say. And I think the defense, because I wonder if his attorney advised him, like, hey, I don't know that this is a good idea. But I think Zach wanted to explain the DNA. And I think the case wasn't there was a lot of evidence. And I think, and then also on the stand, Zach said things that the jury wasn't supposed to hear. And the judge said, hey, let's unhear that. Like the judge was like, no, let's, you have to, I strike that. You don't consider that, but you can't unhear what you've heard. So I think this attorney is doing the best with the client that he has. And because I don't think any attorney would recommend that you get on the stand. And now maybe I remember I'm not a defense attorney, and people have also said that he's gotten 6 months for contempt of court for defying the judge's order over and over, because the judge kept saying, "Don't say that. Don't." Like he knew what he wasn't supposed to say, and in my opinion, he defiantly said those things. Now, I think he's fighting for his life. Like, I think he's like, you know, and I don't think he cared that the judge didn't want it in. I think he thought it should come in, and he said it, which we have rules for a reason. And that's where I have my thoughts.
The mom was the one who posed the danger. Mr. Wilkins talked a lot about This was just interjecting in the custody. Just get John custody. Get him custody, right? If this was all about the custody, why would Zach have waited so long to do it? Right? Part of it, he was in the process. Part of it, he was working on this music project. But the other part is Aida and John were separated for half a year, right? If Zach wanted to fix it to solve John's problem, he would have done it much sooner. But the reason why it took so long is that Zach agonized over it. What do I do? Over time, he continued to get information. What do I do? He didn't want to do it. If he wanted to do it, he would have done it right away. And he told you that when he testified. He told you in detail about that day. He told you about it. About when he woke up, he drove to that location and he thought he was going to throw up. He told you about his hand shaking. He told you about when he got out and got on his bike, it was one pedal in front of the other, just trying to make it there. He told you about this, and you saw him testify. He's, contrary to what Mr. Wilkins.
I do not feel sorry for the distress he was in as he was, because to me, all of those signs are like his body telling him not, don't, don't do that. Let's find another way. Don't do this thing. But those are just my thoughts.
Said he doesn't think he's a hero. He's never asked that. He did what he believed he had to do to save an innocent child. That's what he did. That's why it's more than just the action. He hasn't confessed to any crime. He told you what he did. And he told you the truth about what he did. If Mr. Wilkins talked about solving John's problem, right? And he intimated in his closing that an aspiring or starving, I can't remember what he used, pianist would turn down $10,000. Interesting. As though to say he didn't turn it down. There's no evidence anywhere that John Mello ever paid him a dime to do this. None. Gotta watch the state, ladies and gentlemen. Lot of in the state's closing, lot of moral indignation. That, what do you mean try to be humane? Who can say that? How does that even mean, right? I was not in Zach's shoes. Nobody was in Zach's shoes but Zach. Nobody was. None of us has been in a circumstance where we have reason to believe an innocent child is being abused.
So I have, and I do not do crimes. So I have been in situations where I had reason to believe that that a child or children were being harmed. I report it to DSS. I'm a mandated reporter. Sometimes it came back unfounded. Sometimes it came back founded. Those were hard relationships because sometimes as a therapist, there have been families where we've worked through the investigation process. They were aware that I was the one that had to make the call. As a mandated reporter, I don't have to tell them that I made the call, but if I get called into court or if I viewed any evidence or anything, the families can find out my involvement. And then once DSS is no longer involved, sometimes like it's common that families, especially if it was unfounded, sometimes families terminate services. But it's my job. I have to report suspected or alleged child harm. That's what I have to do. But we don't do crimes. We don't do crimes. And they could have made a report to the school. The school has mandated reporters. But I think people viewed the dad, John Mello, as erratic. And I think the way he was trying to get help actually caused more problems. Um, and it's just tough. It's really tough.
By her own mother, where her father is out of the country, the evidence is shown with a warrant pending, can't come back. When you write an affidavit to try to put the authorities on notice as to what you believe is happening, when you call DSS and DSS does nothing, none of us have been presented with that circumstance. Mr. Wilkins said, we can't condone vigilante justice. That's what he said. He said, if you find him not guilty, I'm going to be out of a job, right? It's really interesting. The state wants you to be a legislature and make decisions for the people of the state in law and order, but they don't want you to be a jury when it comes to deciding how the law applies to the facts, because they just want you to assume he's already confessed to it, he's guilty of a crime. They use the word murder throughout, which is a legal phrase, which is an offense that you have to find. So they want you to speak for the people of the whole state, but they don't want you to really look at the evidence. And that's what we're asking for. That's just what we're asking for. Mr. Wilkins said he could have done other things. This didn't have to happen. Okay. The judge will not instruct you that Zach Hughes had a burden to exhaust all remedies, to try everything he could to do. He tried a lot. He wrote the affidavit, went to DSS, did a lot of different things, but there's absolutely no requirement. We have no burden whatsoever. Just to continue to remind you that we have no burden whatsoever. The burden is on the state, and there's no burden whatsoever for me as Zach Hughes' representative to try to prove to you that he exhausted every remedy. That's just not what the law says, and you don't need to prove. You don't need to even consider that. The evidence is that Zach tried, and when everything failed, that's when he acted to do what he thought was right,
which could be illegal. So don't do that. Don't do that.
And that is, and was, to save Aida Mello. Ladies and gentlemen, the state talked about the mailers, and I don't envy your task. I don't at all. It's a tall task. But I do think the mailers, this piece of the case is a little bit easier for you to resolve, and let me tell you why. The judge is going to tell you that for it to be harassment, a couple things have to happen. First, the person who was the target of the harassment, in this case, Christina Parcell, who's alleged in the indictment, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she actually suffered mental distress, and that a reasonable person would have done so in that circumstance. But there has to be evidence that she actually suffered distress, mental distress. There is almost zero evidence that she actually experienced mental distress in this case, right? Let me talk more about that in specifics. There were at least 3 people who testified for the state who were with her when she gave the letters, those envelopes to law enforcement. At least 3 people: Brad Post, Dan Bevel, Mike Nicholson. Did any of those people testify?
But if she turned it into law enforcement, I would think she was distressed by it. I personally would think that. Like, that's just my natural, she didn't just let it go, but okay.
That she was remotely upset? Any of those people say that she cried? Any of those people say that she was shaking? Any of those people say that she had made statements that led them to believe she was upset? Zero evidence that shows, or that even comes close to proving, that Christina Parcell was upset. And if anything, the evidence you've seen that has been introduced with nude photos of Christina Parcell online, with Alex Fields' affidavit, I think the evidence shows took a lot to get her upset or be in mental distress.
He's trying. He's trying.
So I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, on the harassment charge, that's something that you could go to initially and think about that evidence. And based on your recollection of the evidence, if you find that there's no evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was in mental distress, then that's your answer on that charge right there. It's the state's burden of proof on each and every element. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the state has brought us here, and they've brought the charges that you are to consider. They've decided what to charge, and they have brought us here on these specific charges. And the charges they brought, specifically the charge of murder, is among the most serious charges there is. Doesn't get any more serious than that. Murder, the charge of murder, in contrast to what the state's position is, requires more than the act of killing another person. It requires malice. Malice is defined, the judge is going to define this for you, as evil, as hatred. In his opening statement, Mr. Wilkins told you an angry heart, mad.
And that's where, if I was on the jury, the way that he described Grace and the way that he described Christina, I don't think there was love in his heart. I think he hated what was happening to the child, which I can resonate with that, but we don't let that hate turn into murder. Mm.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you that the evidence in this case has failed to show you that you should be firmly convinced that Zach Hughes had hatred. You can be shown pictures and talked all about the acts, but when it comes to what he was thinking, what the evidence shows that was in his heart.
And that's why the defense asked him what was in his heart, and he described that it was anxiety, that he was wrestling with what he should, whether or not he should do it. He prayed about it. Like that's what he's gonna say, and he felt that it had to be done. Like those were the words that came out of the defendant's mouth.
That evidence hasn't come close. Ladies and gentlemen, in hindsight, 3 years after this happened, it's very fair for you to say this didn't happen, or this didn't have to happen, or disagree. I wouldn't have done that. Some of you may say you would have. Some of you may say you wouldn't. That's fair. Bottom line, can't say otherwise. But no matter what your take on what he did, I think it's so important that we rely on your common sense. And that was one of the things that Mr. Wilkins talked about early on, that how important your common sense is that you bring with you. And so in closing, I'm going to ask that you use your common sense that you brought with you to the courthouse and just ask yourself, does a person who kills another person with the intent to save an innocent child, does that person have evil in their heart? Does that person have an angry heart?
So we could say that I'm thinking of recent cases, and Ashley Benefield had made allegations of SA with Doug Benefield, with the child, that were unfounded. There was never any evidence. His oldest daughter never talked about any SA or anything like that. Um, I don't think people should take someone's life to figure some things like this out. Like it's just I agree. Like you're not God. I don't think people get to make those decisions. Now we're all like a lot of us are saying, because I did a poll, and from my poll, let me find it. We have 77% guilty. Uh let me see. I'm gonna scroll down. 18% hung, so like that the jury might not know, and then 4% not guilty, and that's 149 of us. Law and Crime has a poll going right now, and with over 2,000 votes, they have 83% guilty, 7% not guilty, 10% hung jury. um, that whole does he have evil in his heart thing. And then when we talk about the Bible, that's one of the 10 commandments. Um, and so I want to give us a little bit of a break before we go into the jury questions. So if y'all have wondered, how long has Dr. Barry been making facial expressions? It's been for a pretty long time. Okay. I think I might have been 4 years old here. I don't know, 4 or 5. Okay. So you've been able to read exactly what I'm thinking since about 4 or 5 years old. All right. Let's go on ahead and get to, I think I had it queued up. I think this is Verdict Watch. I have Verdict Watch somewhere. Let me find Verdict Watch. Did I close the wrong thing? Oh, I might no. I think it's on this one. Is this Verdict Watch? Nope, that's not Verdict Watch. Let me find Verdict Watch. Doo, 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 doo. Let me know if y'all have general questions about this case. I do want to talk through um, the questions that the jury has had so far. It's my understanding there have been at least 2 questions. It may have been more. I'm just trying to find the stream, and then I will, uh, share that. Okay, so I guess we're gonna do law and crime verdict watch. Alrighty. Just find the spot. Alright. Alright. This is a very, very difficult case. So the jury came back with a question. They have been deliberating for 2 hours and almost 20 minutes so far. Okay. There's no sound right now. Ooh, I unmuted. Okay. Where's the sound? Hopefully it's not just missing from my side. Okay, sound.
The state's exhibit 66 up there on the
Wait a minute.
overhead.
Yeah, this is verdict watch. Okay, good.
Mr. Hughes, when you drag Christina Parcell across the floor of the front room,
Oh, did they ask to see this again? Do y'all know what the question was? Did the jury ask to see this again?
where you killed her, did you drag her by her arm or by her ankle?
I don't remember for certain, but I think by the ankle.
So maybe verdict. So maybe I didn't. I went too far back. So it's the same stream. They just renamed it because I was like, wait a minute. So I think this is the jury deliberation because I thought the jury had a few questions. Jury deliberating. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Did the prosecution do a rebuttal? Let's see. Okay, the prosecution got back up and did a rebuttal. So let's go back and hear the prosecution's rebuttal. And I'm gonna try to find the this other part. So let's go back to this part.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest to you that your common sense would tell you no.
Thanks so much.
And that person who killed another to save an innocent child is not a murderer. I would ask you to return a not guilty verdict. Thank you very much.
And the state gets the rebuttal.
All right, please forward. Now the state has an opportunity to rebut, and I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be brief, so y'all can get to your deliberations. I do want to address a couple of issues. I want to make very clear, in this record, there is zero evidence of any kind of abuse. Not for witness, not from any evidence.
Oh, the state knew they were going to do that. Oh, The state was tricky with that one because we're going to know things that the jury doesn't know. So we know that after she died, that there was CSAM found and the child had been harmed. But that evidence was not allowed to come into the trial. And so, okay, we're gonna press play.
Mr. Mormon said you got to have some emotional distress from the harassment charges. Christina Parcell had a bunch of neighbors receive pictures of her without clothes on, private photos between her and John Mello. And so what did she do? Immediately, Brad Post corralled them all up, took some from neighbors so they didn't see them, and she went to the police. Going to the police without emotional distress is not something that you see very often. Mr. Mormon talked about not trying to minimize this case. Minimize the killing of Christina Parcell. Minimizing the heinousness of this crime while trying to impugn her character. He talked about malice, and he said that you got to have an angry heart. He kept referring to me. I said, an angry heart, malice. You're mad at somebody. And I'll leave you with this. Ladies and gentlemen, regards to an angry heart, just because Zachary Hughes' heart is so cold and so dead that it can't be angry, that is not a defense. You prove it by his actions. Thank you.
All right. So let's see if this feed has the questions. Verdict watch. Okay. So I think we're going to come back with a question. Enjoy a little bit of music.
I've received a question from you. The question, well,
I'm going to slow it down to regular speed. All right.
is define malice, and then the question is malice required for murder charge? And the answer is yes. Please listen as I recharge you on murder. The defendant is charged with murder, and the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed another person with malice aforethought. Malice is hatred, ill will, or hostility towards another person. It is the intentional doing of a wrongful act and with an intent to inflict an injury or under circumstances that the law will infer an evil intent. Malice aforethought does not require that malice exists for any particular length of time before the act is committed, but malice must exist in the mind of the defendant just before and at the time the act is committed. Therefore, there must be a combination of the previous evil intent and the act. Malice aforethought may be either expressed or inferred. These terms, express and inferred, do not mean different kinds of malice, but merely the manner in which malice may be shown to exist. That is, either by direct evidence or by inference from the facts and circumstances which are proved. Express malice is shown when a person speaks words which express hatred or ill will for another, or when the person prepared beforehand to do the act which was later accomplished. For example, any acts of preparation.
So preparing beforehand can show malice, according to what I'm hearing with the law.
And going to show that the deed was within the defendant's mind would be express malice. Thank you. You can return to your jury room.
So now they went back and then they had a second question. We're just going to find question number 2. Was it a quick question? Let's see. Maybe okay, yep, there we go. All right.
Harassment first degree.
So I'm laughing a little because he's talking, but they haven't switched the feed yet, but we'll listen.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I received your question asking about first and second degree harassment. Harassment first degree. The defendant is charged with harassment first degree. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant engaged in a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that served no legitimate purpose and caused the targeted person and would cause a reasonable person in the targeted person's position to suffer mental distress. Intentional means willful, intending the result which actually occurs, not accidentally or involuntary. Intent may be shown by acts and conduct of the defendant and other circumstances from which you may naturally and reasonably infer intent. The state may prove harassment first degree by showing that the defendant engaged in a pattern of 1. Following the targeted person as the targeted person moved from location to location. 2. Initiating, maintaining, or repeating visual, physical, or verbal contact after the defendant was notified that the contact was unwanted. 3. Surveilling or the maintaining a presence near the targeted person's residence, place of work, school, or another place regularly occupied by the targeted person. Or 4. Committing vandalism and property damage. These are only examples of harassment first degree. You may find that other conduct of the defendant which caused the targeted person mental distress would be harassment first degree. A pattern means 2 or more acts occurring over a period of time, however short, evidencing a continuity of purpose. Harassment second degree. If you find the defendant not guilty of harassment first degree, you may consider whether the defendant is guilty of harassment second degree. A defendant is guilty of harassment in the second degree if the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant engaged in a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that served no legitimate purpose and caused the targeted person and would cause a reasonable person in the targeted person's position to suffer mental distress. Intentional means willful, intending the result which actually occurs, not accidentally or involuntarily. Intent may be shown by acts and conduct of the defendant and other circumstances from which you may naturally and reasonably infer intent. The state may prove harassment second degree by showing that the defendant engaged in a pattern of verbal, written, or electronic contact that is initiated, maintained, or repeated. These are
I hope the jury's getting all of this because he lost me a little, but it's fine. It's because it's almost 6 p.m. and my brain is like either I need some more coffee or like my my poor little brain is like no. But he's doing a good job. So because I think the jury wanted to know the difference between the different types of harassment. So first degree versus second degree.
are only examples of harassment second degree. You may find that other conduct of the defendant which caused the targeted person mental distress.
And I think do I have him back at normal? Do I have him back at normal speed? I probably do. But and it's nothing against the judge. The judge's voice is awesome, but he's putting me to sleep a little. And he's supposed to read it monotone. So judges shouldn't like have their own inflection or like judges are supposed to read it this way, but
Would be harassment second degree. A pattern means 2 or more acts occurring over a period of time, however short, evidencing a continuity of purpose. Electronic contact means any transfer of signs, writings, images, sounds, data, intelligence, or information of any nature transmitted in whole or in part by any device, system, or mechanism, including but not limited to a wire, radio, computer, electromagnetic, photoelectric, or photo-optical system. Okay. You may return to your jury room.
I hope that clears things up. I don't know if it would have cleared things up for me, but it is what it is. And then I think there was a third question right here. I'm trying. There we go. We're getting to, oh, and they put the question on the screen. Thanks, Court TV. Court TV is the best. I watch other channels too.
Madam Foreperson, I've received your question concerning conspiracy and as it pertains to first and second harassment. Conspiracy. The defendant is charged with conspiracy. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant combined with one or more persons for the purpose of committing an unlawful act or of committing a lawful act by unlawful means. There must be a mutual understanding, agreement, or common intention and plan. Mere passive knowledge of or consent to the criminal conduct of another is not enough to make a person a conspirator. There must be guilty knowledge and participation. Similarly, the mere fact that the defendant may have associated with another person or met with another person and discussed common aims and interests does not necessarily establish proof of the existence of a conspiracy or that the defendant was involved in a conspiracy. On the other hand, it is not necessary that the agreement be a formal one, that it be in writing, that the persons hold a meeting and expressly state the terms of the common plan, or that the agreement be stated in words between them. The agreement of a criminal conspiracy may come into being through an implied mutual understanding. The willful, intentional, and knowing adoption by two or more persons of a common plan is sufficient. No overt acts need to be shown to establish a conspiracy. A conspiracy may be shown by circumstantial evidence and the conduct of the parties. In order to convict the defendant of conspiracy, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt not only that the defendant knew of the unlawful conduct, but that the defendant agreed to combine with the other person for the purpose of accomplishing.
And I think he kind of helped prove the conspiracy, like, because the father, John Mello, he said he offered him money to unalive his ex-wife. Like, that's what the defendant said on the stand. And then the defendant said John Mello is the one that told him, that their schedule, you know, who would be home or when people wouldn't be home. Like, we'll see what the jury says, but like a lot of the defendant's testimony to me showed some of these charges for me.
The unlawful conduct. That's the charge on conspiracy, and I would ask you to go back and then look at the verdict form for your direction. Thank you.
Because I hope that the jury has all of this written out on their verdict form. I'm just going to mute the sound here. There we go. So we don't have their music in the background. I did cover the Zizian. Let me find this. Okay, because M said I can't stop thinking about the Zizian cult drama and I don't know if you were talking about while the judge was talking or while the defense attorney was talking. I'm thinking it might have been the judge. So I did talk about the Zizian cult and I think I have the timestamp in it. Let me see which video that was. My life it was Tuesday's stream. So let me see what the title of Tuesday's stream. Let's go to YouTube. Let's go to my channel. So I will show you all how to find this. Share this tab instead. So if you go to my live videos, it is this case, the cold case file. And then I have a timestamp for the Zizian cult. This is it sounds like it's an anarchist group that sounds like they targeted border agents and some other people. And they've allegedly, this group, I don't think they call themselves a cult, but I think they have some cult like behaviors. I think it started as like a band or something. It's all a lot, but there have been deaths of I think over 7 people. I think at one point I heard 8, so at least 7 people in different states. The leader of the group was arrested in Maryland, and Grizzly True Crime did a video on this group. And so please, so if you want more on that case, check that out. And let me know if y'all have any last minute questions. I had so much fun watching Zachary's testimony with y'all earlier today. I was not planning on streaming twice today. I wasn't planning on streaming at all, but I watched Lawyer Lee's coverage of this case, and I have her video tagged down in the description, and then also Courtroom Confidential. I watched his coverage. He had Recovery Addict on as a guest, and this like I could not wait until Saturday to talk about this case. I likely will not stream on Saturday. I saw y'all twice today. I'll probably take a break on Saturday unless something major happens, or the stream on Saturday might be short. We will see. Or I might do a members only stream. We will see. We're going to see what I have the energy for. I have told y'all that I have some healthcare battles for my private practice. So I've had some issues with a few companies that I accept. And so I'm trying to, and that just adds extra energy and time trying to work those things out today. We had a snow day today. I got to work from home. It's a lot easier when I can stream in my like studio versus when I stream at the office in my makeshift studio. And so I keep my light, like I keep everything set up in here. When I have to stream from work, it makes it just it makes it's doable. It just makes it a little bit more complicated. But I so appreciate you all. We will see what happens with the verdict. I believe we are still watching. We're still on verdict watch. Yes. So the jury is still deliberating. I need to go eat, y'all. So drink your water, take care of yourself. Make sure that you don't do crimes. Like I don't like seems right? um connect with people in your community. Um have some joy. If you don't watch Josh Johnson is one of my favorite comedians now. He did a great job breaking down the Super Bowl. I thought it was hilarious. But he has a YouTube channel. But I appreciate you all. I will see y'all next time. Bye.